The Great Sphinx of Giza has been sitting in the Egyptian desert for thousands of years. We've measured it, we've studied it, we've debated its age, its purpose, its builders, and the meaning of the expression of its face. We've sent cameras into the chambers beneath it. We've argued about the water erosion on its body and what that tells us about when it was built. We've been looking at this monument for so long that most people assume we understand it. But we do not. Because buried in the geological surveys, the ground-penetrating radar studies, the ancient Egyptian texts, and the carved stone reliefs found at the sites across Egypt, is a possibility so significant that it would force a complete re-examination of everything we think we know about ancient Egypt and the civilization that built it. There may be a second Sphinx. Not a small replica, not a symbolic representation, a second full-scale Sphinx. The twin of the one we have been staring at for millennia, buried beneath the sand of the Giza Plateau, possibly within a few hundred feet of where you've seen the famous photographs taken 1,000 times. And the evidence for it isn't coming from fringe researchers or conspiracy theorists. It's coming from geologists, Egyptologists, ground-penetrating radar surveys, and text written by ancient Egyptians themselves. And we're going to go through all of it, and we're going to figure this out. If it's there, why has nobody dug it up? Let's start with the official story, because even parts of it that are accepted by mainstream Egyptology are more contested than most people realize. The Great Sphinx of Giza is carved from a single ridge of limestone bedrock on the Giza Plateau on the west bank of the Nile near Cairo. It's approximately 73 meters long and 20 meters high. It faces due east toward the rising sun. It sits at the entrance of the complex associated with the Pyramid of Khafre, the second largest of the three Great Pyramids. The official academic position is that the Sphinx was built during the reign of the pharaoh Khafre, around 2500 BC. This dating is based primarily on the proximity to Khafre's pyramid complex and on a stele, a carved stone tablet, found between the Sphinx's paws that reference Khafre by name. That dating has been seriously challenged. In 1991, geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University published a study arguing that the weathering patterns on the body of the Sphinx are consistent with prolonged rainfall erosion, not wind and sand erosion as would be expected in the monument dated to 2500 BC. Egypt in 2500 BC was already an arid desert. The kind of rainfall erosion Schoch documented on the Sphinx's enclosure walls would require the monument to have been built during a period of significantly higher rainfall, a period that ended in Egypt approximately 7,000 to 10,000 years ago. Robert Schoch is not a fringe figure. He's a tenured university professor with a PhD from Yale. His analysis has been published in peer-reviewed journals. It has been challenged by Egyptologists, primarily on the grounds that it contradicts the accepted chronology. But the geological evidence itself has never been definitively refuted. If Schoch is right, the Sphinx is not 4,500 years old. It's somewhere between 7,000 and 12,000 years old, which means it predates every civilization we have ever identified as building monuments of this scale. That is the context in which the question of the second Sphinx needs to be understood. Not as a curiosity, as a piece of a much larger puzzle about how old Egyptian civilization really is, and what came before it. The most overlooked evidence for a second Sphinx is not geological or technological. It is written, in the words of the ancient Egyptians themselves. The ancient Egyptian concept of the Sphinx, the figure they called the Sheshep Ankh, the living image, or more commonly Acre, was not a single figure. The Acre was a dual deity. Two lion-headed or human-headed figures facing away from each other or toward each other, guarding the entrance of the underworld, the horizon, or the gateway between worlds. The Acre is depicted this way consistently across Egyptian art and text going back to the earliest dynastic periods. Two figures, always two, guarding a threshold together. The coffin texts, some of the oldest religious writings in human history, dating to approximately 2100 BC, refer to the Akeru in the plural, the dual guardians, the two who face each other at the horizon. The Book of the Dead, the guide of the afterlife used by ancient Egyptians for over 1,000 years, contains imagery showing the dual Sphinx clearly, two figures facing each other, back to back. on the horizon, one facing east toward the sun and one facing west toward the setting sun. Now look at the actual Sphinx on the Giza Plateau. It faces east, toward the rising sun. If the ancient texts consistently describe a paired guardian, one facing east and one facing west, and if we found the one facing east, where's the one facing west? Beyond the textual evidence, there are carved stone reliefs. At the temple of Wadi es-Sibuya in Nubia, at multiple sites across the Nile Valley, showing two Sphinx figures facing each other, or positioned as paired guardians. This was not an abstract theological concept. It was a physical reality that the ancient Egyptians depicted because they had seen it. It's not whether the ancient Egyptians believed whether there were two Sphinxes. They clearly did. The question is whether that belief was based on mythology or on memory of something that actually existed. Let's move from the ancient text to the ground beneath the Giza Plateau, because this is where the evidence becomes more difficult to dismiss. The Giza Plateau is not simply a flat area of desert on which 3 pyramids and a sphinx were placed. It is a complex geological formation, a limestone plateau cut by ancient water channels, riddled with natural cavities and chambers, and showing evidence of human modification on a scale that goes significantly beyond what is visible on the surface. Egyptian geologist Farouk El-Baz, a scientist with impeccable credentials who served as science advisor to Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and who worked with NASA on the Apollo program, has argued that the Giza Plateau shows evidence of extensive modification by ancient builders beyond the monuments we know about. El-Baz has pointed to geological features on and around the plateau that suggest large-scale human intervention in the landscape. More specifically, the area to the south and west of the existing Sphinx shows geological characteristics consistent with the second carved structure being present beneath the sand. The limestone formation in that area has the same properties as the ridge from which the existing Sphinx was carved. It is the right depth, the right orientation, the right geological profile for a carved monument of similar scale. This is not speculation. Geological survey work in the area has identified anomalies in the subsurface structure of the plateau that are consistent with, though not conclusive proof of, a large carved feature beneath the sand. The limestone of the Giza Plateau weathers in predictable ways. The known Sphinx shows weathering patterns consistent with being carved from the bedrock and exposed to the elements over a very long period. The area where a second Sphinx is proposed to exist shows surface weathering patterns that geologists have noted are inconsistent with an unmodified natural limestone formation. Something in that area has been worked, cut, shaped. The geological evidence doesn't tell us that it's a Sphinx, but it tells us that the ground in that location is not simply undisturbed natural rock. And then there's the ground-penetrating radar. GPR is a technology that uses radar pulses to image the subsurface of the ground. It's used by archaeologists, geologists, engineers, and military organizations to see what lies beneath surfaces without excavating. It's not perfect. It can't tell you precisely what the subsurface feature is. Only that something is there, and it'll give you a sense of its shape, depth, and density. But in experienced hands, it is an extraordinarily powerful tool. Multiple GPR surveys have been conducted on and around the Giza Plateau over the past several decades, and their results have been consistently interesting and consistently controversial. Studies conducted by various research teams, including work associated with Japanese researchers from Waseda University in the 1980s and 1990s, identified multiple subsurface anomalies on the Giza Plateau. Cavities beneath the Sphinx, tunnels, chambers, features that are inconsistent with natural geological formation and consistent with human construction. Some of these findings have been officially acknowledged by Egyptian authorities. The existence of chambers beneath and around the Sphinx is not disputed. What is disputed is their extent, their age, and what they might contain. In the specific area where researchers have proposed a second Sphinx might be located, GPR surveys have returned signals that are anomalous, inconsistent with simple, undisturbed bedrock, suggesting the presence of subsurface features that have not been fully explained. The precise data from the most recent and most sophisticated GPR surveys of this area has not been fully released to the public or to the independent research community. That last sentence is important. We have the technology to see what's under the sand at Giza. Studies have been conducted. and the complete results have never been made public. Why not? Multiple research teams over multiple decades have applied for permission to conduct excavations or more extensive surveys in the area of the Giza Plateau where subsurface anomalies have been identified. Those applications have been denied, repeatedly. The Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, the government body that controls access to and excavation of Egyptian archaeological sites, has a legal and legitimate authority to regulate who digs where and when. The authority exists for good reasons. Uncontrolled excavation damages irreplaceable sites. The politics of archaeology in Egypt are complex. Foreign researchers have a long history of removing Egyptian artifacts without permission. All of that is real, and all of that is a legitimate part of the context here. But the pattern of denials in specific areas of Giza, around the Sphinx enclosure and the area to its immediate south and west, has been noted by researchers who have no particular ideological axe to grind. Applications that meet professional and ethical standards, submitted by credentialed researchers from accredited institutions. Denied. Zahi Hawass, the former head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities and the most publicly prominent Egyptian archaeologist of the past several decades, has been associated with access restrictions at Giza. Hawass has argued consistently that the existing evidence does not support the existence of undiscovered major structures at Giza, and that the subsurface anomalies identified by GPR surveys have conventional geological explanations. He may be right. His position is the most mainstream academic position. But here's what's difficult to reconcile with that position. If the GPR anomalies have simple geological explanations, if the subsurface features identified by multiple independent research teams are simply natural rock formations, then excavation or more extensive survey work would prove that quickly and definitively. The denial of work doesn't protect an empty hole. It protects whatever's in it. An institution that is confident that there's nothing there should welcome the research that confirms it, right? The repeated denial of that research raises a question that the mainstream position has never answered cleanly. What are they protecting? If there is a second Sphinx buried on the Giza Plateau, what does that even mean? It means the ancient Egyptian texts describing paired guardians were not mythology. They were memory, a record of something that physically existed and was built by someone at some point in the past. It means the civilization that built the Sphinxes was larger, more organized, and more architecturally ambitious than even the mainstream model acknowledges. The Great Sphinx alone required an extraordinary level of social organization to carve from bedrock. Two of them, paired, positioned, oriented with astronomical precision, requires a civilization operating on a level of sophistication that is difficult to reconcile with the conventional timeline of Egyptian development. It means that the Giza Plateau, which we have been excavating and studying for over 2 centuries, still holds secrets of the first order. That our understanding of the site is incomplete in a fundamental rather than a minor way. And it means that the ancient texts, the coffin texts, the Book of the Dead, the acre imagery that appears across 3,000 years of Egyptian religious art, were not invention. They were documentation. The Egyptians drew what they saw. They wrote what they knew. They built their entire cosmological framework around the dual guardians at the horizon because the dual guardians were real. One of them is still there, sitting in the desert, facing east. And if the evidence we have examined today is pointing in the right direction, the other one is still there too, waiting to be found. The Great Sphinx of Giza is one of the most studied monuments in human history, and yet we still don't know with certainty who built it, when it was built, or what it was built to guard. The evidence of a second Sphinx is not proof. Let me be clear about that. The geological surveys are suggestive and not conclusive. The GPR data is anomalous, not definitive. The ancient texts are consistent with the theory, but open to interpretation. What is not open for interpretation is this. Multiple credentialed researchers across multiple decades have identified evidence pointing to the possibility of a second major structure on the Giza Plateau. The Egyptian authorities have repeatedly denied the excavation and survey work that would definitively answer the question. And the ancient Egyptians themselves consistently depicted their guardian figure as 2, not 1. The simplest way to settle this is also one that has been most consistently refused: to dig. What do you think? Do you think we found everything that's on the Giza Plateau? Do you think there's a second Sphinx? This is one specific example that kind of caught my attention because there's actually some evidence behind it. So what are your thoughts? As always, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time. Please like and subscribe and comment on this video. It really helps me out. Until next time, I'll talk to you later.